Sandler Summit returns to the Orlando World Center Marriott on April 2nd and 3rd of 2025. Don't miss out on the premier sales and leadership event of the year. Reserve your seat now at sandler.com/summit. Welcome, everybody. We are live on YouTube. Over 100 people joining in already. This is great. Welcome to today's webinar. You can chime in, tell us where you're from in the chat, and that's how you can join with us there. So we got Eddie Super. He's got superpowers in selling and more joining in on the YouTube comments. You can do that all the way through today's broadcast. I'm Mike Montague, one of our coaches here at Sandler, and I'm joined by our executive chairman, David Mattson. We are talking about the future of sales intelligence today, Dave. But before we jump into it, if you're not familiar with Sandler, we're the world's largest sales training organization, over 200 locations, multiple countries, multiple languages, and we host this live summit every year where we gather together 1,000 of the top leaders in sales and sales management from around the country, and we really try to share the thought leadership about what the current landscape of sales is and the future of sales intelligence. Dave, any opening remarks on who Sandler is, what they need to know, or what we're talking about today?
No, I'm listening, Mike. I'm really excited to share some of our insights and thought leadership. And as you know, and you said it with the 200 offices, we have over 50,000 people coming through our system every year. And I think the goal of today is to share some best practices. And sometimes we see some not so best practices, but really help give the audience today something that they could take back and implement.
Love it. Love the shout outs. Iowa to San Antonio, Ontario, and more joining in today. So don't hesitate to participate at all in the chat, but let's quit playing around and get into it, Dave. I'll toss it over to you. Go off camera. You can call me back whenever you want and we'll chime in. But great to see everybody. This is the future of sales intelligence. Please welcome David Mattson.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Hey, listen, thank you, everybody. Listen, my LinkedIn has been blowing up over the last 24 hours. I think there's like over 500 people have just popped in. Lots of clients, lots of new people. So thanks for joining us. Hey, this is, as Mike said, we've got 200 offices. And what we have the privilege of doing is working with over 50,000 people a year. And within that audience, if you think about it, we've got so many different types of businesses. We have sales motions that are transactional, consultative, short selling cycles, long selling cycles, selling to governments, different products and services, different sales motions from around the world. So if you overlap, as cultures on top of that, just a lot of different views that we get to see. And what I want to do today is to share with you what we're going to call 3 imperatives, which are really best practices that we've seen and some trends that we've seen going on. I want to share those with you. Please understand that because we have a limited time, I'm going to spend my time probably at 25,000 feet, and we'll dig deep, but we have plenty behind this. And then maybe at a future program, we can share those with you. So what are these imperatives or these trends that we're seeing? Well, there's 3 that I'll share with you today. First is the buyers. In today's more complex buyer journey and sales landscape is going to require a new breed of salespeople. So let's think about that. We're going to dig into these in a couple seconds, but certainly tech has changed an awful lot, right? Tech has changed the way we buy and the way we sell. I make the assumption, I hope you do too, that anytime somebody calls you, that they've already researched your company, they already researched your products and services and your competitors. Now, they don't know the nuances between your product or service and your competitors, even though they've investigated it. That's your job. But we have to understand where they're entering into the buyer journey, right? Because that's changed as well, because we want to make sure that we have matched our messages and our approach where it fits. And when it comes to the sales landscape, look, you've got tech in the pre-funnel activity, the funnel activity, post-funnel or expansion, I'll call it. And we're going to cover that in a couple minutes, but just think about a simple example that we all use, like ChatGPT. That has changed the way people are selling. Our ability to research into the depth that we can today versus a year ago is night and day. And even to the ability for us to type in 30-second commercials or what is the pain of this persona in this industry, in this company, is amazing. It shrinks, if you think about it, the sales process to a certain extent, because I don't have to take 2 or 3 calls to better understand my buyer if we've never worked with that industry or that particular person. It kind of gets me to page 4. Now I've got to validate and make sure that that's appropriate, but I get to connect some dots that weren't there for sure. The other one that we're talking about is, hey, look, technology and sales, they really have to be working in conjunction. They have to be connected at the hip for the survival of your sales organization. And we're going to cover that in depth in a couple minutes. But if you really think about it, there's so much tech that has come over the last, since 2020, actually. Pandemics, they don't bring a lot of innovation. They bring a ton of acceleration. Like, we've all used Zoom before that. Vidyard was out, all the sales tools, CRM, they were all there prior to 2020, but they have really played such an important role and a different role since COVID. So that's there. But we want to make sure when it comes to technology, a couple different things. One, we're leveraging it. We have a strategy that we've incorporated methodology into our technology. Technology for the sake of technology is not going to do it, right? If you just think about a simple example, I could do a email for prospecting purposes. It's going to get me this much success. I could do a video-based message for prospecting. Let's say Vidyard, I'll use that as an example. I'm going to do this much better. But if you put methodology, Sandler methodology, or whatever you're using on top of that, wow, the power from just a simple email to now using methodology in a video-based messaging system is just night and day. So it's that type of thing that we've got to make sure that we're really paying attention to. But the bottom line is, we want to make sure it's in the flow of work, meaning it's in the dashboard that salespeople are using. You don't want them to go to half a dozen locations. And we're making more and more data-driven decisions in today's environment. Our last imperative that we're going to talk about is, in order to have a competitive edge in tomorrow's marketplace, we have to have really strong sales leaders. I've always said that, but now moving forward with all the things that are going on in the buyer journey and the sales landscape, sales management is even more important than it ever was in the past. And, I think that's the toughest job in most organizations. You're going in, you're responsible for driving revenue. You're responsible for making sure it's the tip of the spear. Everybody in the organization relies on the fact that you're bringing it in. Our teams are bigger and bigger since COVID. It's remote, which makes it even more difficult to manage. And so all these things are going on in both all of these 3 imperatives. But like, what's behind the scenes? If I really think about it, like, what's driving some of these things? And there's some things that you've seen, I've seen, but I think there's some things that pop up that cause all the things that we're going to talk about today. Cost of money, interest rates, obviously they're going through the roof. We all know that as consumers. But when money is more expensive, there's a ripple effect. The ripple effect is we make conservative decisions, right? Our decisions are going to become very conservative now versus, yeah, let's throw X amount of dollars at that. We'll see what happens. Well, those days aren't really around anymore. And so we've got more conservative decisions. When that happens, there's another kind of ripple effect of that. Well, one is that we're making what I'm going to call enterprise decisions now. So we're trying to leverage our investments in whatever. Let's just take a software platform of some sort. If we're buying a platform, 3 years ago, a year ago, we would let different groups in an organization decide what platform is best for them. We just want them to become more effective and more efficient. No, now what's happening is the mothership is saying, this is the platform that we are going to standardize on. We're going to leverage our investment. We're going to make sure that we've got all the data necessary funneling up into one system. And so now more universal decisions, which means that the stakeholders that used to be able to buy their individual product and service, whatever we're selling, now is part of a team, part of a committee, right? And so I used to be over here in total control. Now I'm part of this other team and I'm a voice of many. And that has changed, right? So it's becoming very difficult to figure out how to navigate towards all of those things. And remote has made it easy for multiple decision makers to get involved. A couple of years ago, I would have to, if I was on a committee and home office is on the other side of the country, I would have to get on a plane, take a day to get there. And hopefully we've consolidated meetings. So I've got 2 days of meetings. and I'm going to fly back. Okay, well, there's a week, right? There's 4 days. It's gone, blew it. And if I'm on multiple committees, after a while, that gets pretty taxing on my time. And I will say things like, hey, listen, Mary and I, we think alike. Mary is going to be my proxy vote. Now, that sounds great, but as a seller, what typically happens is if Mary doesn't do what I like, then I'm going to pop my head up at the very end and restart these discussions. But it makes it easier in remote because now what I do is I would just go down the hallway, pop on a camera, spend 45 minutes in the meeting like everybody else, and then go on my day. So it's easy for lots of people to get involved. And we're going to talk about that. Technology, we're going to talk a little bit about that too. It's accelerating at a pace that I've never seen in my career. You've got supply chain issues that they just don't seem to be going away. And so all these things are causing buyer journey changes, sales changes, new technology coming on. And so that's really what I'm going to call the force behind the force. So let's break up each one of these three imperatives and kind of dig a little deeper in each one. So remember, the first one is, hey, we've got a complex buyer journey out there. It's ever changing. We've got the sales landscape is changing. We're going to have to do things differently. We need a different breed of salespeople. So there's a lot there, right? We talked about the reasons for this, the cost of money and remote and technology, all factors. But let's pick on just one or two things in this category. Remember, now we're going to stay 30,000 feet up. So a lot more in here, but let's just pick on maybe 2 or 3 things that would apply here. One, we already talked about the complexity of the decision-making process that our buyers have. Money is tight, more people involved, which means now more than ever, we have a team buying situation. Team buying, right? Used to be not so much, but I've been teaching team selling for 20 years. And people would roll their eyes and be like, I do that once in a while, not very often. And now it's like, well, they can't get enough of it. Oh, give us the tactics and strategies. How do I maintain control? How do I get my partner under control? All the things that are popping up because now you're doing it, right? But, we can argue whether this visual represents what you're experiencing, because we can say, look, there's a lot of studies out there, whether it's Salesforce or HubSpot or Forest or, and they have different numbers. You can say, well, is it 4 to 8 involved in the decision process these days? Is it 8 to 12? If you read Gartner these days, they're saying, well, we found a couple more. We think it's 19. So who knows the number? And now we're not going to argue about the number, but I think we can all agree it's a little more complicated than it was, right? So just think about this for a second. What changes have you seen in your buying process? Just think about it. And have you really thought about it? Have you really looked at the landscape to say, has the buyers and the people involved in my buying and the processes, has it changed? And what have I done about it? See, that's the question. Like, what have I done about it? Am I aware of it? And have I done anything about it? And so the thing is, if this is directionally correct, and I believe it is, just from all my experience and the people that I deal with, why do salespeople continue to try to sell one to this whole landscape? Why would I do that? Think about all the functional expertise here, right? They know a ton of stuff. Why would I, as an individual salesperson, try to sell to multiple buyers? I mean, in the old days, it's kind of simple. It was a 1-to-1, maybe 1-to-2. I'd have, finance pop in at the last minute to make sure that, we were in line with the pricing model or whatever the case may be. So all that stuff was there, but that's how it was, right? And if I think salespeople in today's world, if it's more than a 1-to-1, 1-to-2 ratio, if I go back to that other visual for a second, it's pretty complex. And salespeople thinking that they can actually talk the talk to every one of those functional buyers, that functional expertise that resides in each one of those people is insane. Because think about it, salespeople, we know a little about a lot of things, right? Now, a little about the market, lots about our products, stuff like that. But functional expertise on our buying side, they know a lot about a little. I mean, they are experts at what they do. I'm trying to be an expert in lots of different things, but they have like PhDs, like they can go down to the minutia in their area of expertise, which makes it difficult for you as a seller who's trying to, be that universal person to have all the answers. And so that's really what I'm seeing. The question then, of course, is why? Like, why do we do that? If we know the functional buyers have way more expertise than us, and maybe we can put in a chat for a second, which is, have you tracked your success rate if you're selling on your own versus you're selling on a team? Which one is more successful? Chat it in. Is it when I sell by myself? Now I'm assuming you have a multiple buyers involved, or is it when I sell in a pack? Which one is it? Jot it in there, and I'm going to come back to it in a second. But if you think about all the sellers that go in by themselves, why do they do that? Well, we'd have to ask them, I guess, but I'm going to make some generalizations. One is, I don't think they trust the team. I don't think they trust the team. I've been in front of tens of thousands of salespeople, and they're like, "Hey, I don't want to bring in a team because if I'm going down based on my mistake, right? They're really good at what they do, but they can't talk to my customers. They don't know how to interact. They don't know how to control how much they're saying. And I spent 6 months getting to this point in time, and they're going to spend 6 minutes blowing up my deal." Now, I know you don't say that, but we've heard it. I've heard it a million times. Or maybe the salesperson is just super overconfident, right? Like, nobody can do a good job like I can. We've heard it a million times. And by the way, we are overconfident as salespeople because, we get our heads kicked in 99% of the day, right? I mean, we lose more than we win in sales. So being overconfident is a self-protection mechanism. We get it. But sometimes our ego's involved. You've got that. Maybe just lack of self-awareness that there is a better way, or even resistance of change. That, of course, happens. But the bottom line is that team buying requires team selling. Mike, what's it coming in as you see the chat there?
Well, the teams are catching up here. So
right.
The people working by themselves really quick to jump in there. We had Sharon's 90% by herself. Andrew's a solopreneur. Sean says by himself, but then James says he's 4-1 better as a team. Or Jamie Jackson here is variable, but about 80-20 to herself. Teamwork makes the dream work, says Mitch, obviously chiming in there as well. So I think, you're hitting on some really interesting things here. It kind of depends on what business you're in, how much you have in the funnel, what your sales cycles are, how complicated that buyer team is.
100%.
But it's getting more complicated all the time, right?
Yeah, 100%. So obviously, if you're in a one-to-one, this doesn't apply to you. If you're in a one-to-many, if you're in a business to B2B type sale, start paying attention to it, right? So the question then is, well, how do I actually leverage this? Well, if you do decide, right, to bring in others into the sales process, because now if you think about it, I am selling in teams, I'm buying in teams, right? A couple things pop to mind. You need to map the buyer network. You need to map out the buyer network, which means this: who's involved in this particular engagement, right? Because obviously players on the selling side and the buying side, they change. It's situational, but who's actually participating in this particular buying cycle? Who is it? By role, by title, right? You want to know who that is. We often say we'd like to know who that is, but you're often just focused on who's the decision maker. I get it, but there's a lot of people who have voices in this decision. They may not be the ultimate decision maker, but figure out who's who. The other thing that I would suggest here is who should be involved, but not involved, right? So if, for instance, in my world, I know the chief revenue officer should be involved if you're going to do worldwide performance improvement. Now, if they're not, I know they should be statistically. They're going to get involved sooner or later in my mind, because that's what happens 8 out of 10 times. I'm going to start figuring out a way to get that CRO involved, because what tends to happen if I don't pay attention to that, I ignore it, like, oh, I guess they're not here, it's not important. They pop up at the last second, right? I'm on page 10, and here they come, and they say maybe they have a relationship with somebody else. Maybe they're not on board with some of the key metrics that we're measuring. Maybe they're not, who knows, but it's a variable. I hate variables as a professional salesperson. I want to minimize all that stuff. So figure out who should be involved, test it out, try to get them involved. That's key. Now, what are we mapping our sellers and our buyers against, right? Because you have options too on your selling team. Well, I want to map things like roles, titles, right? Roles and titles. I think that's important. You always hear salespeople say, listen, they've got their senior executive. Come on, I need a senior leader on my team. You're naturally doing this anyways. Let's just do it all the time on purpose. So I want that. Certainly we want to match expertise. If I got a group of engineers, sure, somebody right out of university, they know a lot, I'm sure, but matching them up against somebody that's got 20 years experience in that particular industry, probably you could do a little better than that, right? And so expertise, you got roles, you've got, how about just behavioral? How about behavioral styles, right? So as an example, we all have different behavioral styles. We happen to use DISC here at Sandler. But if I have a high driver, talks 1,000 miles a minute, 30,000 feet, doesn't get down to a lot of the details, right? Jumps to conclusions, all that stuff. I don't want somebody that matched up that is highly detailed, like slowing the process down, asking all the clarifying questions. By the way, you should be doing that. But all that stuff, it would drive that buyer crazy. Or somebody that's not a big talker, and they're matched up against somebody who spends 48 minutes of a 60-minute meeting talking about their weekend. I mean, their head explodes. So match them up based on the buying styles, the behavioral styles, the expertise, the roles, and the experience level. Those are the things that I would be paying attention to. That's what I believe you should be matching people up against. Now, just think about what this happens, because if you've got good functional sellers matched up against our functional expertise, now what we're doing is we're leveraging that, because you as an individual salesperson, as I said, you know a lot about a little, right? But you've got to match that up in a way, because now let's just take two engineers. They can take those conversations to the second, third layer questions, right? My side as sellers, we can ask really good questions that I would not be able to even think about as a seller. I'm not an engineer, as an example, right? But my engineer also gets to connect dots. Oh, so you're saying you have a problem with here. Well, wouldn't that also mean then, because of their expertise, that this also could be a problem? Well, I never thought about that, says the buyer. So now I'm having this conversation, which is completely different than the 3 or 4 qualifying questions that I've memorized as a salesperson. And so that's key. That's what I'm asking. Connect the dots, right? That's the beauty of getting it done that way. Now, here's the thing though. We have to be collaborative. So now we've mapped it. I get it. And you say, well, I've matched my expertise. I've matched all this. So therefore it should be perfect. And I wish it was. I wish that's all it took. Unfortunately, that's not how it works, right? So we have to collaborate, knowing full well they're buying in teams. We need to sell in teams. And, if we're going to hunt in packs, if I use that analogy for a second, we're far more effective if we're hunting in packs. We're far more effective if everybody knows their role about what's going on. A lone hunter, not as successful as a pack hunter. And just think about our own society, like the sports, NFL as an example, right? They're very collaborative. You don't see, a quarterback in the NFL get into a huddle and say this, guys, we're in a heavy competition here today. You've all been on the team now for 5 to 6 years. You're all veterans. You all make a ton of money. I'm pretty sure you know your positions. So on the count of 3, do the best you can. Break. That doesn't happen. No, they call a specific play. We know the tackles are going this way. The guards are doing this. We know the tight end's coming around. We know we're going to count to 5. We're going to throw that ball over to there. That person will be there. They're not there right now, but they will be there. Everybody's got to play. It's very well orchestrated. That's how sales should be as well, right? So I'm a huge believer in pre-call planning. You should have a pre-call plan. We should level set our team. We should make sure that we're completely aligned on who's exiting and entering when. If it's a long selling cycle, there are certain times you want partners in and certain times you don't. You don't have to have a partner in from the time you start the sales process to the time that you end. You don't need to do that, but we should be aligned on Like, when am I coming and going? What's my role in the sales process, right? Am I only there for when you call on me for expertise, right? So I'm my sales engineer. Like, should I say nothing until you call on me? So like, what's the role that I've got there? Who do you want me to contact within the buyer side? Like, what questions should I be asking? Right? So salesperson, air traffic control, what questions should I ask? What messages should I deliver? Right? Because if you think about it, my role as a team sell is to talk to a lot of people on the buying side who are not professional buyers. When you have a professional buyer who deals with salespeople all day long, they're more like this. We cannot tell you this. That is information that is, we cannot do that. We'll give you a slight edge, whatever they say. But when you talk to engineer, you just ask a question, they'll give you the answer, right? They'll give you the answer because they're not worried about all that stuff. You know what they're worried about? Do you understand my problem? Do you have the right product and service? And do I trust that you could do a job? So let me tell you what it is so I can make that determination that you're the right fit. So they tend to tell you an awful lot. So use it to your advantage. Use it to your advantage in that particular situation. It's just there. Look, you got to pick the right team based on all those things I talked about: expertise, role, behavioral style. Don't pick your teams based on there's somebody just sitting on the beach waiting, right? That's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it. And by the way, that happens an awful lot. I see an awful lot when somebody says, well, why don't you just use Joe over there? Joe's not on an engagement. In the consulting world, they call that Joe's on the beach. Why don't we use them? Well, okay, if Joe fits, but if Joe's a disconnect, you don't want to use Joe, right? Because it'll just foster all that paranoia that salespeople have to begin with, which is that person's not qualified to be on my gig. Now, the same thing though, you can't control on the back end, like I only will work with that person. You've got to make sure that you're spreading that out. Otherwise, you're taxing the back end, all the support people that are there to help you. And that tends not to work. So, what else? We have to be coordinated. You have to be coordinated. What does this mean? This means, I already said, here are the things we should be doing on pre-call planning. Right? We certainly want to know, as I said, what questions do you want me to ask? What am I gonna, what questions do you want me to give for them? What messaging, things like that. But there are rules. Sales, you are air traffic controller. In my mind, I don't care about my title, right? So listen, I've got a pretty big title, but when I'm on a team cell, which I am later today, I am part of the team. I don't run that call. My salesperson runs the call. They have all the stuff that happens. They have all the hindsight. They're the ones who are going to run it. And I want the potency to be with that salesperson. I'm not taking charge because of the title on my card. I suggest salespeople continue to play air traffic controller, and they should be working on roles and responsibilities of the team. They should say, here's how I'm going to pass the baton from me to you when it's your turn. They should be able to say, hey, I want you to answer these 3 or 4 topics, and you have 10 minutes. That's it. That's all I've scheduled for your explanation. So telling people what to say, how long they have is important. You know how many times I've heard a salesperson tell me in a program, Dave, I had a runaway partner. I mean, I asked them a question. It was 5 minutes into the call. 45 minutes later, they're still talking. How's that possible? Well, it's possible because you didn't put time blocks there, right? I blame you as a salesperson. You could jump in. You could have set time blocks. So if you don't cover it up front, don't be upset when it happens to you on the back end, right? It's like a general rule there. So what else do we want to pay attention to when we're collaborating, coordinating? When am I checking in? Like, when am I giving you the information? That's also one of those Achilles heel. I'm having conversations, let's say as a sales engineer, and I'm not feeding back the information that I'm learning back into my CRM or back into my salesperson. That's a big problem. You have to remember, everybody's got 1,000 things going on during the day. It's really hard to over communicate. It's really hard to have pre-call planning, but you have to do it. You got to find a way. You have to find a way. So even as an example, there's some shortcuts. A shortcut that I use, if I can't get all 6 people on a call, I mean, it's just impossible to get done. I do a pre-call planner on video. I'll do a Zoom, I'll do a Vidyard, and I'll just say, we have an upcoming call. The 4 of you are invited. Here are the roles that I want each one of you to play. Here's who's coming on the other side. Mary, these are the 3 questions that I'd like you to weave in at some point in time. You're going to get asked over here, Ed, about our assessment suite, right? Here are their concerns. I'd like you to keep your answer within a 5-minute time block here. It's important because we got a lot to cover, and I'm going over the things I would have said. Now there's no interaction, but they watch the video. It takes 5 minutes of their time. It's not a big meeting. They can do it. I don't care if they're on a plane. They can do it whenever they're doing it, but it at least gets me that level set if I can't call that meeting together when we're doing this voice to voice or live. So that's all there. This seems pretty intuitive when I said, well, they don't share information from one seller to another. The fact of the matter is they don't. And so as an example, I have 5 children. So, 2 of them are in sales. One started as a BDR, now I guess he's an AE, and he was a rock star. Why is he a rock star? Because he over communicated. Here's what happened. He would have a conversation. It's 20 minutes long, maybe 30. His job was to pre-qualify. His job then was to write in the notes, hand it off to the AE. AE would take it from there, qualify and do a demo, right? Well, what was happening? The AE was not reading any notes. The AEs were actually just jumping on, asking the same questions that the BDR, the initial salesperson, asked, and they were getting frustrated. They're like, I already answered all these questions. I don't want to do this. What's happened? I thought you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And there were big disconnects. He had the most appointments set, and they weren't going anywhere. He said, well, they're not listening. I mean, they're not reading the stuff. I said, Connor, why don't you just do the handoff live? What does that mean? So now what happens is I've got a call with Mary, my engineer, my prospect, right? And I say, hey, listen, thanks for jumping on today. I think we still have about 45 minutes. Is that still good? Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, yep. Mary, yep, good. Hey, listen, I know on our last call, let me just kind of summarize where we are. On our last call, we talked about X, Y, and Z, and you had a problem with this and the impact over there. This was a ripple effect that caused you some anxiety in this particular area, and it's probably costing you about $500,000. And he would just review the pain indicators that he found and any of the business stuff that was uncovered. And then he would say, have I left anything out? No, you covered it. Mary, I know that Mr. and Mrs. Prospect also had a couple questions surrounding how does our products actually, solve this problem. And so I know that they'd like to see that today. And then there's Mary. And I say, but I know Mary actually asked me a couple questions, would like to start the call today by asking a couple questions directly so she can better understand the issue to then do this particular example or explanation. It took like 5 minutes. And everybody's on the same page. What he did is he assumed they weren't going to read the notes because they didn't. He did it live, and now, bam, the highest activity in the company with the highest conversion rate now because they were coordinated. That's the key. Every time you're with professional services or any organization that has a delivery team, they know so much more about your now customer. It's not a prospect anymore, customer, and that's important. So you always have to get feeding in because your job as sales is, I'm sure, to go deep and wide and sell additional products and services to your customer. So you always want to know what's going on in the rollout, in the implementation. How is our customer? Any other topics pop up? Because you and I both know when they're in implementation mode, all the other pains come out because we're outside of the buyer-seller mode. Now we're working together. So now, blah, here come all the other issues that never came up on a sales call. So plenty of opportunities if you're coordinated, if you're over communicating. But at the end of the day, you got to leverage your team members. And so it builds credibility because you have expertise talking to experts, then it shows depth, shows bench, it builds trust, it builds conviction. They understand the problem. I've explained it. Looks like they've got the background and they have the products and services do it. That's super helpful. It'll also uncover lots of information that you won't get as a salesperson. And I've just said that, right? Because functional people just kind of just say, here's the issue, here's what's going on. They just want it solved. They just want it solved. They're not worried about whether they tell you who's involved in the decision-making process. They'll tell you actually, hey, push comes to shove, the one that's got the most issue Is that person in that department over there? That's who I would pay attention to. They weren't even on my radar screen. I was talking to somebody over here. So they tell you all the interdynamics of what's going on within that organization. And really, they'll help you with the pre-call strategy. I love that. I'll give you a quick example of how to leverage your team members, and we're going to move on to something else. So I'm with a company who does tours, and they would do a tour as a Hail Mary. So if the client was going south, or the prospect, they would say, "Hey, come visit our tour, our plant," and they would visit the plant. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But what they noticed, it worked when a particular foreman would do something different than just wave as all the buyers walked by with the sales group. What they would end up doing is they would say, hey, they walk over, introduce themselves, and they would say, hi, I'm Fred. I'm the shop foreman here. My responsibility is, if you decide to move forward, is to really understand what your needs are. You and I will be communicating an awful lot. My job is to meet and exceed the specifications that you've outlined and to make sure that we hit all of the deadlines for you. And it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm available if you have any questions for me. And then that buyer started asking tons of questions because they were unhappy with the current level of service. And there was mistakes and things of that nature. That closed business. That was it. And so now that particular company does that all the time. So it's there. All right, 80s. Listen, we've already 68% of the buyers are through the process, right? Well, if you just think about that for a second, that seems like good news. Well, wait a minute, that's awesome. I don't have to engage with my prospect until they're almost done in the buying process. And Amazon has taught us to do a lot without buyers, without salespeople. I mean, like, I buy a ton of stuff on Amazon, and I'm pro salespeople. I bought cars. I bought 3 separate cars on the internet. Never saw a salesperson. I bought 2 homes. Now, did I go see them? I did at the last second, only to say, yes, I'm buying it. I did everything else online. It's unheard of. So we've been taught to do this. So you have to figure out, where are they in the process? Because when they're coming to you midway, you've got to really understand, do they know the issue? Like, where are they in the process? We make this assumption that buyers are coming to us when they're ready to make a decision. And maybe that's true. But you have to verify that as a seller, right? Because if you think about the buying process, engagement, hey, I'm talking about the issue. I know there's a problem. I'm not really sure what it is. I'm talking about it internally, externally. Consideration, I'm considering my options to attack it. I'm considering who on the outside world can help me, who internally can help me. I'm making some decisions, whether I am doing it internally or externally. Who am I going to pick as my partner? And then advocacy, which is, I want raving fans. So those are the 4 steps. But if people are coming to me halfway through the sales process, I don't know where they are. And so, one of the things that I like to do is just, I trust but verify, and so when somebody calls me and says, hey, David, tell me a little about Sandler, I said, happy to do that. Let me ask you a couple of questions. I always found there's 2 organizations that typically call in. One group, they absolutely have identified the problem, right? They know the issue. They validated it internally. They understand and have a business case, right? This is what it's, is causing all these issues. They have all that done. Now what they're doing is they're calling to figure out who's got the best products and service and who's the best partner. That's one group. This other group, which is the majority of people, are calling saying, I have an issue. I think I know what it is. I'm not sure if I fully understand the breadth and depth of what it is, but I'm really looking for experts in the industry to come help me identify what the problem is. And then you as a buyer can then go out and figure out who the right partner is. Which one are you? Well, I'm number 1. Trust but verify. That's great. Hey, let me ask you a couple of questions so I can get caught up to where you are, so I can better serve you in what products or service may be the best fit. So can I go backwards for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to accelerate forward? And I go immediately, because I want to know, like, what messaging, what sales approach am I taking when? And the other thing that, you've got to figure out how to do for sure is expand the conversation. Because if they're coming to you midway through the sales process, you haven't had an opportunity to expand it. So let's take an example in my world, isn't it? So in my world, somebody may call and say, I've got a low close rate. Okay, I could solve that problem in 2 seconds, right? Really, that's what we do. I mean, that's like our swing zone. But maybe I'm going to go a little farther left, because I know if you have a low close rate, the cause of that is probably because you don't have a qualification process. The cause of that is probably because you've never put a dollar amount of what that problem was costing the company. So they didn't really feel compelled to move, right? There was no financial impact to the pain. You probably have no deal review process. So you have no coaching for managers to help people get and progress deals. So now that's a whole nother set of conversations. On the flip side, what happens if you do have a low close rate? Well, chances are you're discounting to get a deal. Chances are you have absolutely an unreliable funnel, which makes it hard to make good decisions as leaders. And if you did sell it because you didn't really know when it was going to close, all the people that's doing the implementation aren't available. And that's a real problem, right? So now I get to expand all these things and bring in additional products and services that may also help solve the problem they bring me, but solve some of the symptoms and take care of some of the end results, the effects of what we're talking about. So a good example of, hey, you hear what they say, but kind of move upstream, move downstream, right? That's the point of that. So let's kind of shift, because I know we got time issues today. So the second imperative is, hey, for the survival of your sales organization, you have to have sales and technology working hand in hand, right? They've got to have a symbiotic relationship. And people always ask me, Dave, is sales an art form or a science? And I always say it's really kind of a science played by an artist. And that balance beam has always been art, less science. But now it's really going this way over the last couple of years. And, historically, sales and marketing you had to have this relationship from sales and marketing. In most organizations, I'm sure not yours, but most organizations, there's like this friction. Sometimes it's unhealthy. Most of the times it's healthy, which is, sales is like, hey, you don't give me enough leads. Marketing is saying you don't even call them the leads that I give you. Hey, your support material isn't, consistent with my messaging. Well, then maybe you should change your messaging. So you got this back and forth. Now you add technology. So now we have this triangle. So for the Sandler clients, we know we love triangles. You got technology, you got marketing, and now I've got sales, right? Think about it. It makes it that much stronger, because the friction that used to happen between sales and marketing, technology can solve that, because technology now says, here's the messages that you should be sending now. My sequencing, my drips, everything is there already. So how is technology kind of influence the things that we've talked about in the buyer journey and the sales and the management? Well, in the buyer journey, we've kind of talked about it, where there's an incredible amount of technology available for them. They certainly have researched, as I said, your product, your company, your competition. They have the ability now, and we have the ability in the buyer journey to look at the breadcrumbs. What does that mean? You can actually tell that there are 7 people within that buyer company, that buyer network, that is actually looking on either our site or the website, looking for these topics. I can get ahead of the curve. They didn't respond to us yet. They haven't even reached out. I know they're looking. I can jump in quick. Technology has allowed me to do that. It's amazing, right? I also now, because of all the things that we have, I've got to use different engagement techniques in today's world to be that much more successful. So what about in sales and technology? Well, look, we've kind of talked about that already, if you think about it, but in the sales side, you've got huge impact, right? You've got pre-funnel, funnel, post-funnel, which is like the expansion stuff. In our pre-funnel activity, wow. I mean, you've got technology has brought chatbots. They're talking to you all left and right. It's not a human. Hey, may I talk to you? How can I help you? That's AI, right? AI is picking your prospect list now. AI is making the calls for you, whether it's an auto dialer, whether it's a avatar making the outbound calls for you. All that stuff is now there, right? AI has allowed us to do all of the things. It actually writes the letters for me, right? It's doing all of those things. In the funnel itself, I actually do a lot of things. I have the ability now to predict my close. AI will tell me the probability of close. I can look at a deal. I think, hey, look, I've got a fair shot at this. I got like an 80% shot. I've actually given it to my manager as part of the sales funnel. Guess what? AI says you've got about a 40% probability of close. And here's what you have to do to get it to 80%. It tells me what to do. Wow. How cool is that? How cool is that? That's awesome. I have a dashboard that AI pops up on my screen that says, here is how you're talking to that person. And there's a disconnect. They've lost engagement. You have to change your word pattern. You have to say it this way. It actually writes the follow-up letter for me. On the management side, technology has had huge impact, right? It's actually collecting all of this data now that's there. It's helped in so many different ways. And maybe that's really where, let's go there, because sales leaders, we're going to have to embrace those changes. We have to be the supporter of those. I mean, ultimately, we're going to talk about sales management here in a second, but you need a technology strategy. We did a whole day on integrating sales and technology. If you didn't sit through that, I think there's like 5,000 people on that particular program, that webinar. Go download it. It's there. It's very cool. Spends a lot of time there. But the bottom line is people are always asking, Dave, what technology should I have? I got so many different parts or different technologies that do the same thing. And SaaS is really causing that, right? Because no SaaS platform wants you to leave. They don't want you to leave the platform. So they're going to do everything. Think about voice intelligence. There was one company that did voice intelligence. Then there were two. And now everybody has voice intelligence. Everybody has X, Y, and Z. I mean, that's just the way it is. So there's a lot of overlap. And CROs are like, which one should I pick? How do I consolidate this, right? What am I doing? The second thing is they have to, as leaders, as I said, you have to be carrying the flag to use technology and to leverage it for sure. But I think the other thing that we've got to pay attention to is how do I make sure that technology is in that flow of work? As I said, CRM is like everything is happening in CRM. And so we have to make sure, as I said earlier, methodology is baked into technology. It's in the flow of work. Data now is moved up because leaders, their whole role of leaders is changing. So if you want to know tons about sales and technology and what's going on there, go to that webinar that was just designed to do that. We can put that link in a chat for you, but that was like rock solid. But what else are some of these imperatives? So we've talked about the landscape, the buyer landscape, the sales landscape is changing. Technology and sales have to be connected at the hip. The third one is, hey, in order to get a competitive edge in today's market, you got to have strong leaders. You have to have strong sales management. Absolutely. I think sales management is the toughest job in any organization. As I said, they're managing revenue and they're managing a team that is completely different. They have different skill sets, they have different experiences, and they have different personality types. So can you imagine, like if you have, I'm not going to go teach my whole team closing skills because they have different skill levels and different needs. It's hard. I've almost got to do it individually now. And it's really hard to do. And most managers don't have a lot of training and coaching. You know, what tends to happen is there's an opening in sales management. We look around in the C-suite saying, well, who's going to do that? Well, let me just call some top producers. So I make some calls. Mary, hey, it's Dave. You know, Fred left the sales leadership position, and we've had our eye on you. We really have good. You know, we think that this is a good opportunity for you. We've always had great thoughts about you and our hopes, and we think this is a good opportunity for you to explore. We'd love you to take over the sales management position. What? No? Of course, we'll still support you. Hey, listen, we thought enough about you to offer you the job, or at least to interview for it. We love you. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay, bye. Hey, Steve, it's Dave. Listen, we've had our eye on you for a long time, brother. And so what happens is we making this call until somebody says yes. Now, it's pretty dramatic, and I'm overgeneralizing. I know that, but that's what happens, right? In so many ways. So they have tons of stuff going on. They're juggling so many balls. Let's look at two things that really have changed in the sales leadership side. One is with all the remote stuff going on that we talked about, onboarding. Like, here's the question. You can just get yes or no in the chat. Does your company measure the time to hire to the time to first sale? Time to hire to time to first sale. If they're not, you should. You should shrink that time all the time. Look, that onboarding process, it's a kind of a weird spot, right? Because it's the company wants you to produce. They want you to make sure that you hit that quota. They want to make sure that they pick the right candidate. You as a new hire, you want to make sure that this company is the right company, that you're going to have a path to success, that you have the opportunity to make the money that they said that you were going to make. So we're past the dating phase. It's just this weird spot in our relationship where like we're just launching. So all I'm looking for is what's the path to success. Most onboarding throws the kitchen sink at them. Like here's 22 product overviews that you have to learn. Here's exactly 100% landscape of what's going on in our industry. All this stuff that's important, but doesn't help me close my first sale, right? Just simplify it for them. I watch people like, you're going to spend 3 weeks with this sales rep. You're going to shadow over there. That sounds great if it's orchestrated like team selling, but otherwise, you know what that person's doing for a week or two? They're just telling them all their bad habits. Hey, listen, they're going to tell you to do the CRM. You don't have to do it, right? You know that happens. So I'm not saying don't leverage other people. I'm saying have a plan and focus it down. So what are the things that you have to pay attention to for your first 120 days? A couple different things. Step one, just go identify what they have to know in that first 3 to 6 months. That's it. And not saying don't teach the other stuff, but if you have 22 products and the majority of your salespeople are selling 2, give them the 2 up front, right? Lower what they have to know, increase confidence and conviction. So create a list of what they have to know to get that first sale. Second, put it in order of priority. Put it in order of priority. There's certain things they have to know up front. Okay, company overview, get it. Okay, 30-second commercial, how to get an appointment on the phone, how to run a good first call. You can do the list, put it in order. That's step 2. Step 3, give them an example. Give them an example. It's called, show it to them. So if you have 30-second commercial as an example, show them the 30-second commercial. Give it to them. Let them mimic it. That's what they do. Let them mimic it. Don't say, go make a 30-second commercial. I've seen it happen a million times. I'm like, why would you do that? It's the blind leading. They don't know how to do a 30-second commercial in your industry. Why don't you give them one? Well, we don't have one. Just go on Zoom, record it. You have a video, you can hit transcribe. You have it in 5 minutes. Give them something to mimic. Give them an example of success. That's what I'm suggesting. Step 4, show them, show me. What does that mean? Well, let me see it. I showed it to you. Now do it back to me. Do it back to me. Hey, next Friday, I'm going to call. I'd like to hear your 30-second commercial. Do you know what that rep's doing all week? They're practicing the 30-second commercial. That's awesome. Confidence, right? Conviction. I know my 30-second commercial. You feel good as an employer. They're learning what you want them to learn. And they're doing it in a way, they're mimicking success. That's awesome. So that's the steps of a good onboarding program. Look at what you're doing. And if you don't have one, if you're an individual rep, right? I'm an individual producer. If you know somebody that's got an awesome phone call, go get the recording, transcribe it, mimic it. What else are we doing? Well, if you think about onboarding and offboarding, it drives culture, right? Because sales culture, I'm telling them what is expected to succeed, and this is the only thing that you need. I'm fast forwarding because I'm only giving them the things that are necessary. I'm creating a culture of accountability. How is that possible? Because I've told them what's important, when to learn it, and I want you to test it. So if you think about it, most leaders are always coming to me, how do I create a culture of accountability, Dave? Well, this is a good example of how to do it. This is how you do it. And then you get to coach and train based on their ability to do that 30-second commercial as an example. But put all the heavy lifting on them, right? Here it is, come back and show it to me. But here's something else that they're struggling with. Deal coaching. Look, deal coaching is hard, right? It's a hard gig. And have you ever been in a situation where you thought you had a deal? You thought you had a deal. You thought it was coming in this month, and it didn't come in this month. And it didn't come in next month. And you don't know why, really. Or you thought you asked all the right questions, but you didn't. Because what happened? You got outsold at the very last minute by a competitor with an inferior product. I mean, how is that happening? It happened because you got outsold. So How do I get deals through this funnel? I think poor deal coaching and funnel management are connected in my mind, right? Poor deal review is always connected to a poor pipeline. So how do I do it? Listen, couple things. They're poorly run. There's not enough time. I've got 45 minutes to really have you as a sales rep explain to me where you are in a deal from your perception, which makes it even harder, right? Because that's your perception, may not be reality. I've got to interpret what you're telling me and then quickly give you what I would do. Now, hopefully, all that is right on track. The majority of the time, it's not on track, right? So it's not there. But how cool would it be? And it's possible in today's world with AI for me to have a laser guided AI tool that says, here's exactly where you are in that deal. And here's exactly what you need to do to get to that next step, increasing the probability of success by X. That is super cool, right? Because that now tells me this is where I am. This is what I have to do. As I could do this on my own as a rep. It helps me as a sales manager because I got an X-ray immediately without asking 1,000 questions that you may or may not have the right answer to. So all that is there. And so it just takes away the guessing, right? Managers in today's environment shouldn't have to ask all the what's going on, what this, what that. Data is getting rolled up, right, by AI. And so you're not in the data collection industry anymore. You're in the why are we doing it and the how and why. Whereas most managers were spending all this time collecting data. So that's there. But if I can increase probability of close by rep in 30-minute meetings, oh my gosh, that is so cool. Now, I would also suggest that you have exit criteria, right? These are the 2 or 3 things that you need to know before you move to the next stage of your sales process. But if you're doing it right, AI is coming out and they just got this down pat. I mean, proof after proof of the increased close rates that are you as a leader, you as a sales rep are doing. Like Voice Intelligent, that was the big aha way back. Oh my gosh, I'm talking this amount of money. I'm asking these types of questions. It was like mind blowing. That's like old news these days. Like generative AI in your sales funnel is like, wow, it blows your mind. And so these are just 3 imperatives that we've gathered from the 50,000 people that we talk to every year. And I know, again, it's at 25,000 feet, but ask yourself this: have you really looked at the buying process? Have you made adjustments based on that buying process? Have you mapped out the buyers? And have you picked out your selling team based on that? Have you done that? Have you really coordinated all the pre-call planning stuff that you have to do? I mean, are you legitimately onboarding properly? I mean, are you giving them examples of success? These are the questions that hopefully you heard me ask you today that you can take back and give some answers there. And so, Mike, these are just some of the things that we've gotten out of the 50,000 people that we're talking to in and out. And I know there's a lot of topics here for sure, and we can do some things in the future to kind of drill these things down a little more in depth as we move forward.
Yeah, I'd like to encourage everybody else one more time to join the conversation in the YouTube chat. Share us what are you going to change in 2024? What was your biggest takeaway from today? We'd love to hear that. Also, don't forget to join us for the Sandler Summit. We're doing it again in Orlando. That will be April 2nd and 3rd of next year. So it's a ways away. We also do a virtual summit, ton of free webinars and stuff like this. But we had an absolute blast at this past summit. Dave talked about this future of selling. We had amazing attendee feedback and a great time there. A lot of people already booking their tickets for next year, and we would love to see you there if you are doing it. Dave, thank you so much for your time today and the insights that you're sharing here. I know you're always working hard at distilling this thought leadership, and I forget, do you not even know how many books you have published now? The latest one, How to Sell to the Modern Buyer, I was thinking would also be a great takeaway from this one, but there's like 8 other best-selling books from Dave. If you go on Amazon, check those out, or reach out to a local Sandler trainer and get involved. If you have any questions, don't go without the help. We got local offices. We have an enterprise team. If you have multiple offices doing multiple languages and all kinds of stuff like that, we would love to help you out. There's no reason to not get the help that you need. And Dave, final thought here. I wanted to Nancy asked about that app, and you were showing a little bit of the stats there at the end. Do you want to give us a quick 30-second commercial for that deal IQ and forecasting that we have?
Yeah, so I mean, Deal IQ is a AI driven tool. We use it at Sandler. We made it available. You can certainly Google it as well. But what it does is it goes in and it gets smarter and smarter about your deals. It can tell you exactly how the team is going to hit their quota or not. It can tell you by individual, by team. It'll tell you what to do. It'll give you, here's what you need to do to shrink, that gap between where you are and where you need to do, Mike. It's one thing to say you got a 42% probability of close. Okay, great. What am I going to do? The good news is it tells you exactly what to do next. And to me, that is awesome, because I may not be able to rely on my manager. Maybe they don't have enough time to spend all that with me. But if I can self-prescribe based on that, boy, I'll tell you what, I can excel my own deals, and that makes everybody happy, Mike.
Thank you so much. Nancy, reach out to your local office or reach out to us. I think we're connected with both of you. Thanks for everybody for joining. And Jim asked, is that for managers or the salesperson? The salespeople can also see the predictions, but really that's a management pipeline forecasting deal and a way to coach and stuff there. So thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you at the Sandler Summit. Good luck. Good selling, everybody. Sandler Summit returns to the Orlando World Center Marriott on April 2nd and 3rd of 2025. Don't miss out on the premier sales and leadership event of the year. Reserve your seat now at sandler.com/summit.